Hi, friends. Thank you for being here. My name is Caitlin, and welcome to another episode of the It's Cult O'Clock podcast. Today, we are talking about Heaven's Gate cult. Buckle up, it's a wild ride. I actually have watched documentaries about this, listened to podcast episodes about this. It's wild. Trigger warning, we do talk about some pretty heavy stuff and some pretty terrible things, so just be warned. Anyways, let's get into it. So we're going to talk about the Heaven's Gate cult. We're going to unravel the beliefs, experiences, and ultimate fate of the individuals who went through this. So basically, our journey begins in the 1970s as Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, I think that's how I say your last name, the founders of Heaven's Gate, embark on a spiritual quest. So Bonnie and Marshall, aka T and Doe, first met in the early 1970s. T, who is Bonnie Nettles, was a registered nurse, and Doe, who is Marshall, was a former music professor. Their meeting set the stage for the formation of the cult. So T and Doe meet in Houston, Texas in 1972. The exact circumstances of their initial meeting are not exclusively documented, but it is believed to have been a chance encounter. Both individuals were searching for a deeper meaning in life and shared a belief that they were divine messengers with a higher purpose. T and Doe found common ground in their spiritual beliefs and shared a conviction that they were on a mission to a special calling. They believed that they were emissaries sent from a higher level of existence to guide followers toward spiritual enlightenment and eventual transcendence. Inspired by their shared vision, T and Doe formed a group that went on through various names before settling on human individual metamorphosis, end quote, and later adopting the name Heaven's Gate. They attracted followers who resonated with their charismatic leadership and the promise of a higher spiritual existence. The group engaged in communal living, often isolating themselves from mainstream society. They formed a tightly knit community that followed strict rules and adhered to the teachings of T and Doe. Over time, the belief system of Heaven's Gate evolved, incorporating ideas related to extraterrestrial beings, ascension to a higher plane, and the belief that a spaceship would come to Earth to take the followers to a new existence. T and Doe, the leaders of the Heaven's Gate cult, adopted these names as part of their belief system and to reflect their perceived roles in a larger cosmic mission. So T was Bonnie Nettles' chosen name within the context of Heaven's Gate. The exact origin of the name T is not explicitly documented, but it is likely that she saw it as a symbol of her spiritual identity and role within the group. Naming conventions within cults or alternative spiritual movements often carry symbolic significance. Similarly, Marshall Applewhite adopted the name Doe. The choice of this name reflects his perceived role as a guide or a leader within the group. The name Doe may signify a sense of doing or carrying out a mission, aligning with the group's beliefs in their purpose and destiny. T and Doe believed that they were extraterrestrial beings, messengers from a higher level of existence who came to guide their followers towards spiritual enlightenment and eventual transcendence. The adoption of these names was part of their creation of a new identity that transcended their earthly personas. In embracing new names, T and Doe were symbolically breaking with their past identities and affiliations. This act reinforced the idea that they were embarking on a unique spiritual journey that required a departure from conventional societal norms. The adoption of names like T and Doe is not uncommon in cults or alternative spiritual movements. It serves to mark a departure from conventional identities, establish a shared sense of purpose among followers, and align with the leader's perceived cosmic roles. The names played a crucial role in reinforcing the distinct identity and beliefs of Heaven's Gate within the context of their communal living and spiritual journey. The group's ideology evolved over time. It started to incorporate elements of various spiritual, religious, and extraterrestrial concepts. Members of Heaven's Gate believed that they were extraterrestrial beings who temporarily inhabited human bodies. They considered themselves as, quote, the next level, end quote, above human existence. The central tenet of Heaven's Gate was the belief in ascension to a higher plane of existence. Followers were convinced that shedding their human bodies was necessary to achieve this transcendent state. The cult believed in the existence of extraterrestrial spacecraft and tied their beliefs to comets. They thought that these spacecrafts would pick up their consciousness after they had shed their physical bodies. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles were considered messengers or representatives of higher extraterrestrial beings. Their teachings were regarded as divine guidance for followers. Heaven's Gate adherents were influenced by apocalyptic ideas. They believed that Earth was about to be wiped clean, and their departure was a means of escaping the impending cataclysm. Members were encouraged to sever ties with their families and any earthly attachments. They believed that family relationships were obstacles to spiritual growth and ascension. Heaven's Gate members pooled their resources together and isolated themselves from mainstream society. The communal lifestyle fostered a sense of unity and focus dedicated to their beliefs. The group adhered to a set of strict discipline rules, including dietary restrictions, celibacy, and codes of conduct. These disciplines were seen as essential for spiritual purification and readiness for ascension. Members adopted a uniform, gender-neutral appearance. Men and women dressed alike in similar clothes and had similar hairstyles, emphasizing the group's rejection of individualism and focus on collective identity. Heaven's Gate incorporated a unique vocabulary with terms related to technology and cybernetics. This reflected their belief in the merging of human and extraterrestrial consciousness. Leading up to the mass suicide event in 1997, members engaged in meticulous preparation, including creating farewell videos and securing resources for their journey. Members followed the teachings of leaders T-Endo, who were considered messengers from a higher extraterrestrial plane. To de-emphasize individuality, members adopted a uniform appearance. Like I stated earlier, both men and women dressed alike, often wearing similar clothes and maintaining similar hairstyles. The group operated under the leadership of Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettle, aka T&O, whose authority was unquestioned. Decision-making and teachings were centralized, creating an environment where followers were expected to conform to the leader's guidance without dissent. The belief system of Heaven's Gate involved a complex combination of spiritual, extraterrestrial, and apocalyptic ideas. Members were encouraged to align their thoughts and behaviors with the group's teachings, fostering a form of cognitive control that contributed to a cohesive group identity. Members intentionally isolated themselves from mainstream society. This isolation was both physical and cultural. They limited contact with the outside world, they avoided media, and they avoided societal norms. Like I stated earlier, the group had, very strict rules, very strict dietary restrictions, codes of conduct. They had to be celibate. They also engaged in spiritual practices, which were taught by T&O. These practices include group rituals, discussions about extraterrestrial life, and the study of the group's unique interpretation of religious and philosophical concepts. The ultimate goal of life in Heaven's Gate was preparation for ascension to a higher plane of existence. Members believed that their earthly bodies were vessels holding them back, and they prepared for the anticipated departure to join an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Despite the communal aspects and shared beliefs, life within Heaven's Gate was not universally positive. Former members have shared accounts of psychological manipulation, strict control, and the challenges associated with adhering to the group's demands. Heaven's Gate embraced polygamous relationships within the group. Marshall as the leader, was known to have multiple spiritual wives, and this practice was accepted among members. The group's beliefs included the idea that earthly relationships were temporary and spiritual connections were paramount. Relationships within Heaven's Gate were often framed in a spiritual and communal context. Members referred to each other as brothers and sisters, and emphasizing a shared spiritual journey and commitment to the group's teachings. The sense of community was central to their identity. The group operated with a hierarchical structure, with Marshall and Bonnie as the central figures. While communal decision-making was encouraged, the authority of the leaders influenced the overall dynamics of the group. In the mid-1990s, as the internet became more widely accessible, Heaven's Gate established a website. The website served as a platform to share the group's beliefs, teachings, and information about their impending departure to an extraterrestrial spacecraft. It included extensive materials, including writings, videos, and audio recordings created by the group. The internet allowed Heaven's Gate to reach a global audience. People from around the world could access the group's teachings, fostering a level of invisibility that was not possible through traditional means. The website became a central hub for disseminating their beliefs and messages. The internet provided a means for potential recruits to learn about Heaven's Gate and its teachings. The group used the online platform to communicate its unique blend of spiritual, extraterrestrial, and apocalyptic beliefs. While the internet facilitated communication, the group also engaged in offline recruitment efforts. Heaven's Gate was characterized by a self-imposed isolation that contributed to the group's distinct identity and belief system. The group deliberately isolated itself from mainstream society. Members withdrew from conventional societal cultures. They chose to live separately from the rest of the world. The isolation was intended to minimize external influences and distractions. Members were encouraged to get rid of ties with their families and limit contact with non-members. The belief was that their family relationships could hinder their spiritual growth and distract followers from their shared mission of preparing for ascension. The isolation allowed members to concentrate on their spiritual development without the interference of external influences. This included engaging in group rituals, adhering to strict disciplines, and following the teachings of Tian-Do. To reinforce a sense of collective identity and de-emphasize individuality, Heaven's Gate members adopted a uniform appearance, like we already know. They also had limited exposure to mainstream media, television, newspapers, and other external sources. They had limited contact to that. This really helped control the narrative of what was going on in the group, and so Tian-Do could have more control over the group all around. While there was no widespread reports of physical abuse within the Heaven's Gate cult, some former members have shared accounts of psychological and emotional manipulation. The structure of the group, with Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles as authoritative leaders, contributed to a power dynamic that, in some cases, bordered a coercive control. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles held significant authority within the group. Their decisions were final, and you could not question what they were saying, basically. You couldn't disagree with them. You couldn't do anything. You basically had to go with what they said or else. Along with, the isolation from mainstream society, because of that, the group leaders were able to control them more because they didn't have anybody in the outside world. Members were also expected to adhere to the teachings of Tian-Do. They had to be obedient, they had to listen, they had to follow the rules, they had to do everything. The belief system of Heaven's Gate included elements that might induce cognitive dissonance, where members had to reconcile conflicting beliefs or experiences. So this tension could contribute to a sense of control. So members basically sought to align their thoughts and behaviors from the group's teaching. So all in all of that created a way for Tian-Do to really control the group and really make it so other people couldn't really leave, or they didn't feel good to leave, or they didn't know what else to do. Unfortunately, there's a tragic end to Heaven's Gate. It occurred in March of 1997. 39 members of the cult participated in a mass suicide event. The group believed that shedding their earthly bodies was necessary for them to ascend to a higher plane of existence and board an extraterrestrial spacecraft they believe was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. So this comet was coming in 1997, and they believed that there was a spacecraft that was coming with it, and it was coming to get them. The members of Heaven's Gate, had a long belief in the existence of extraterrestrial beings, and that a spacecraft would come and get them to bring them to their higher level of existence. They also believed that Earth was about to be completely wiped clean, and they needed to leave their human bodies behind in order to embark on the cosmic journey. In the weeks leading up to the mass suicide, the group intensified its preparations. Members created farewell videos, also known as exit statements, in which they explained their decision to leave their human bodies. They secured resources, and just tragic. They rented a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, which is where the tragic event unfolds. On March 24th and March 25th of 1997, the members ingested a lethal concoction of applesauce, pudding, and vodka mixed with barbiturates, I think. Is that how you say that? They also placed plastic bags over their heads to ensure asphyxiation. The method was meticulously coordinated to facilitate a mass departure from their earthly existence. On March 26, 1997, the bodies of the 39 deceased members were discovered by police in the mansion. The discovery included both men and women dressed in matching outfits and lying peacefully in bunk beds, each with their faces covered by a purple piece of cloth. The group left behind farewell messages and statements explaining their beliefs, and they also talked about why they had to leave and why they had to go on this cosmic journey. The mass suicide event marked the tragic end of Heaven's Gate and their beliefs and practices. It brought global attention to the group and raised questions about the influence of charismatic leaders, the potential for psychological manipulation within cults, and the consequences of extreme belief systems. The legacy of Heaven's Gate serves as a cautionary tale about the complexities of alternative spiritual movements and the impact of charismatic leadership on vulnerable individuals. So that is the story of the Heaven's Gate cult. I know there's multiple documentaries, multiple podcast episodes. Definitely go. I think it's on Netflix, if I remember correctly, the most popular one. Netflix or Hulu, one or the other. Definitely go check it out because it's wild. It definitely goes into way more depth than what I just went through. I kind of just gave you the basics. You can also find the Heaven's Gate website. It's still up. You can go on it. You can see everything they put up there. Yeah, I didn't watch any of the videos. I didn't want to see that, but I did look at what they wrote as their statement and everything. So definitely check it out if that's something you're into. And yeah, just a terrible tragedy that happened. So anyways, on that note, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Follow along and subscribe if you want to hear about more cults. And thank you so much for listening. See you guys later. Bye.